the whole point here is like being content with your calling. If we're not careful, we'll start comparing our wins to other people's wins, our wins to other people's, losses. Our numbers, or our this, or our that, or our business, or our marriage, or our kids, or our ministry, whatever you're doing in life. And so I'm using this from a ministry perspective, and there will be ministry leaders and pastors listening, but on a daily perspective, be careful what you compare yourself to. Welcome to the Good Life Podcast, where we talk about the search for significance, the pursuit of purpose, and the challenges of our culture. My name is Carl Nichols. I'm your host, and I'm here with Daniel Foster. And again, we are honored that you would join us on this journey. Today, we are finishing our conversation on purpose. This has been an incredible month as we've talked about purpose, the pieces of purpose, finding your purpose, and really kind of debunking this myth of what it means to find your purpose, and really what our purpose in life is to live out God's purpose, serve His purpose. Before we jump in, I thought we could have a little fun. I know as a kid, I had some dreams, some big aspirations of what I wanted to be when I got older. I'll share those in a minute, but I've told the funny stories about being a clown as a kid and in kids ministry. I definitely didn't want to be a clown.
I still want to see that picture.
I'm going to try to find that picture, and maybe we'll show it on the podcast soon. But what did you want to be when you were 5, 6, 8, 10 years old? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a police officer and an astronaut. I want to be both.
So you could
I'll be in space patrolling people.
There you go. Patrol nobody. That's funny. You had bigger dreams than I did as a kid, man. I wanted to be, so I grew up in the country. I say country, Sunnyside, Georgia, north of Griffin.
Oh yeah.
Not the big city part of Griffin, but the
I know where Sunnyside is.
Outskirts. And so, I had never seen a trash truck. I had never seen a trash truck come by and pick up like the thing and then dump it. You're laughing because you didn't know I was going to say this. And one day I was at a friend's house and I saw a trash truck come and get their bin and dump it. And there was a dude riding on the back of the trash truck. And I wanted, from that day forward for like the next 2 years, like, I want to be a trash man.
Carl in waste management.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, there's nothing wrong with that. Listen, if that's your job, I just like, as a kid, it wasn't about like recycling or taking care of the environment. It was like, I want to ride on the back of that truck and hang off. That was the whole thing I wanted to do in life. And so, look, nothing wrong. I love my trash people. I love people who pick waste management.
Waste management, y'all are the MVPs.
Yeah, but it had nothing to do with actually what it was doing for the world. I just wanted to ride
on the truck.
Yes, and so that's what I wanted to do.
Have you gotten to ride on a trash truck since then?
I have not, but I do feel like the trash man at my house. I'm constantly I'm so grateful for the waste management that's a half a mile down the street from my house, outside of my neighborhood. So coming off of Christmas,
if you have any waste management listening right now, you can give Carl a ride on the back of your truck. Let us know.
If you are in waste management and will come pick me up and let me just go on
let's make this happen.
I will go on I don't know what insurance liabilities would come with that, but I would ride a route with you just to say I did it. I fulfilled my dream as a child. That would be amazing.
That's incredible. We got to make this happen this year.
And if you're an astronaut and you would like to take Daniel to space.
Please, that would be incredible. So I'll also sign off any insurance waivers.
Yeah, for real. I don't know that I would go to space. I don't have that. So
I would do that.
We're going to wrap this conversation up today with just a couple thoughts about when you get to that point in your life where you've stepped onto some kind of platform. And I don't mean like, for me, I preach on a stage. I don't mean that. I mean like when you have an area of influence and you're stepping into God's calling, plans, and purposes. You've been faithful. You've kind of gotten a vision of where God's taking you, but you're not focused on that. You've began recognizing that you have potential in your life. You've been faithful in the process and patient with the process. Served where you're at. Serve God's people. Serve God's purpose. You've learned from the people along the pathway. We talked about some of those people in a previous episode, our last episode, and the positive and the negative people that come into your life. And now you get to that point in your life where you're like, man, I'm gaining influence. And listen, influence comes in so many ways. It's not like it can be on the job, it can be on the sports field, it can be in your school if you're a student, even. But there's levels of like maybe opportunities that we have along the way, or different stages or platforms we step on. So
yeah, can I say, I believe everybody has influence.
Yes.
You have everybody listening right now. You have influence in the life of somebody.
Yep.
A family member, a child, a spouse, a sibling. We all carry influence.
Yeah.
And I would challenge, don't waste that influence. We have influence. I know there's different levels of influence, and that's what you're getting to. There's different weights of influence for sure, but I think we all have influence with somebody.
That's a great point. So as we talk about those platforms, and again, platforms don't mean stages. It means, okay, these are the people that I'm influencing now.
Yes.
Those platforms change along the way. Those circles change along the way. But here's a good example of that. I don't have influence with parents and how to teach them to be a good parent until I've been a parent.
Yep.
So in order to do that, I got to be faithful being a good parent so I can help more parents become good parents.
Right.
But if I'm not faithful with parenting my children, loving my children, disciplining my children, raising my children with a godly worldview versus like just being a good kid, how can I help others? So my influence when my kids are born and young might be with my kids.
Yeah.
As I graduate them out of my house and see them thrive, prayerfully, that's going to happen. Now I have influence with people going, how'd you do that? Different platform, different season of life. So that's what we're talking about. Like, same thing with marriage, same thing with your business, same thing with your relationships. You're right. You have influence when you're faithful. We'll end with this, or at some point, talk about being faithful in little things. Yeah. But now you're in a season of life where you have maybe more influence than you realize. It's more than like, hey, I just had my neighbor. Now, man, I'm I'm a supervisor at work, or I'm overseeing a ministry team at my church, or I'm leading a small group, or, maybe in your situation, you're a student pastor, or maybe, you've gotten a promotion. I mean, you have your own business, whatever, right. Those circles of influence where people are looking at, more people have their eyes on you. Let's put it that way. Okay. Yeah. So when you're in that season, how do you make the most of that? We'll call it the platform. But I think the reason I'm using that term is because so many people seek a platform, but really a platform is a place of service. It's the same thing we started with. And if you're not faithful in the general plans that God has and purposes today, you will abuse that platform one day. So the first thing I want to give you is this. When you get to that season where you have influence and you have a platform of some capacity, not because you built it, because God gave it to you, use it, don't abuse it. Use it, don't abuse it. In other words, I have a car. I drive a car. I have a car that will go really fast. I don't abuse that car. Have I torqued it a couple times for fun to see how fast it would go? Yes. But do I abuse that car by no, I use that car to get around town, to get me from, if I abuse it, then I can't use it for the right purposes. So, lose it. Yeah. And so, same thing is true of our calling. So, a couple thoughts I put. Never take pride in the platform God's given you. Never take pride in the platform God's given you. As a dominant personality, a competitive person, a red choleric, I like to win. I like to compete.
I'm aware.
Honestly, I think I like to compete more than I like to win. I like the challenge, and that's, the studies would show that that's my wiring.
Do you get bored of winning?
Do I? Well, I mean, it depends on how much I'm winning. And so I think, but here's the problem. It's not about winning. It's about like I achieved. Yeah. I felt good. I like the challenge. There was a task at hand. But here's the problem with that. I like to win. I like to be right. I think we all like to be right. My tendency might be more than some. And listen, some people go, yeah, and they can. That's another fiery dart that people throw. But at the end of the day, just because you win, just because you may be right, just because you may have achieved something, God can take all that away in a heartbeat. Yeah, sure can. And I think in my 20s, I struggled with this. In my 30s, I kind of grew up a little bit. I remember when we started Relevant Church, I wanted to be on the fastest growing churches in America list. It's like, I want to be there, so we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And I remember when we hit that list, we were number 13 overall in percentage. I mean, they take all these they throw them in and they say, okay, you're number 13. But we were the fastest growing church in America when it came to percentage growth. Wow. And I was like, flew me to Colorado, hung out with a bunch of large church pastors. They gave me a plaque, and I went,
now what?
Now what? Yeah. Exactly right. And God so clearly spoke to me and goes, it really ain't that satisfying, is it? So that was just like 5 years ago. And listen, it's fun. The joy was not getting the award. The joy was going, I did it. Yeah. We did it. But guess what? COVID hits. We're opening a new building. We have all these dreams and aspirations of opening a new building with thousands. And it's like, we open a new building and it's me and a camera crew. You see where now all of a sudden, if you're not careful, If you don't use that platform for the right reasons, you lose your calling, you lose your purpose, you lose your 100%. sense of contentment. And so I would just say there were smaller platforms that Joseph had along his journey. We've been talking about the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 37 through really all the way through the end of the book of Genesis. Has a dream, tells his brothers are jealous because they're like, we're not going to bow down to you. You're not going to rule over us. They sell him into slavery. He goes to Potiphar's house as a slave. Potiphar sees God's favor. He's faithful in serving, faithful to God. Potiphar says, here, you can have command over my house. Then he's accused by Potiphar's wife. He's thrown in a prison cell. He's faithful in the prison cell, does what God tells him. The people he meets in the prison cell take him to the palace, to the king. He's serving the king.
Quite the story.
Yeah, he's now so he's been on all these platforms. So platform number 1 was slave. Platform number 2 was, no, I'm the second most powerful person in my master's house. Then I'm in prison, different platform, different circle. Now I'm in the palace. And so he's on all these different platforms along the way, and he had to make sure he was using those platforms. Who would have thought the prison cell was actually a platform for a bigger platform? And so he used those platforms, and he didn't abuse those platforms. If he wanted to abuse the platforms, he could have slept with Potiphar's wife, and she probably would have stayed silent. I don't know that to be true, but I mean, his faithfulness in the platform God had given him, what seemingly put him in prison, actually led him to the palace. Wow. And so here's some ways that we abuse our platforms. Let's say you have a job and you're apathetic on your job. You're lazy on your job. You have influence in circles of, spiritual influence, relational influence, business influence, and you're apathetic. Or maybe you're arrogant. Or maybe you have pride. And so if you're not careful, you will abuse whatever platform you're on because it becomes more about you. Because what happens is we start in those small things. Luke 16:10, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with very much. Now, here's what I want to say about that. If I'm trusted with little, God will open up the platform. And I'll be honest with much. But if I build my own platform and get there, my own way, hard way, grinding, I can still make it appear like God got me there, but then I'll be dishonest in that as well. So I think that whole conversation of be faithful in little, you can be trusted with much, be faithful with that. You don't use whatever platform you're on, but don't abuse it.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a verse I grabbed onto many years ago in ministry, Zechariah 4:10, and it says, don't despise small beginnings. And I took some time and reflected on my pathway to my purpose, my pathway to where I'm at right now, to the seat that I'm sitting in.
Sure.
I graduated high school, and shortly after that, I was asked if I wanted to lead a 6th grade guys Sunday school class, small group. I'm like, sure. I don't know. You were in student ministry, so the fact that I'm still in ministry today after leading a 6th grade guys group is just a miracle in of itself. It was just wild. So I did that faithfully for a year. That year was up, and my youth pastor said, okay, would you like to lead the 7th and 8th grade guys? All right, so now I stay with my group, and I'm added another group, so it kind of grew a little bit. I did that faithfully for a year. My youth pastor said, okay, you want to be a middle school youth, the middle school youth pastor? I said, okay, one step at a time. I led that, and another opportunity opened up where I became a youth pastor at another church in Griffin, and served them faithfully for 5.5 years. And while I was there, I kind of felt like God was about to move some things, and I saw that you guys were here at Relevant was looking for a youth pastor. So I thought, well, this is it. I'm gonna be a part of Relevant Church. And I just was watching from afar what y'all were doing here and saw all the growth that was happening and the life change. And I think I even made the statement like I would scrub toilets to be a part of what's happening at Relevant Church. And I interviewed for what I think it was like a 6-hour interview. It was like from 3 to 9. It was the longest interview. We had dinner. It was insane. And I remember leaving that interview. I had like 80 text messages. People were like, "Are you alive? Are you okay?" I'm like, I'm good. I'm more alive than ever. Like I thought that I had this job. I was so confident. And you had called me a week later, and you're like, "Hey, man." The nicest way possible to say, like, we're sorry, but we don't want you. You said, "I don't think we've interviewed the person we're looking for yet." I'm like, oh. That is so sad, but you said it so kind, so thank you.
You told me you still have that voicemail.
I don't, that was a phone call, but I do have the very first voicemail where you called me.
Okay.
You're trying to get in touch. We're playing phone tag or whatever, and I just, for fun, I just kept that. And I still have that on my phone today. And so I had to do some just inner processing, like, all right, well, I thought this was my next step, God, but that door is closed. And looking back, I can see how God wanted me to stay where I was in that season. And our pastor at the time left the church shortly after that. And so I was required to step up for a season and to lead the church in many very different areas. Spoke every Sunday and led the deacons and other meetings. So, I mean, they needed me there for that season. It wasn't ready. And then things passed, our paths crossed, and led to conversations where you were able to bring me on 2 years later here. And if you would have hired me in that moment to be the youth pastor, I would have failed.
That's good.
I wasn't prepared for that. God wasn't ready for me to step into that seat yet.
That's good.
And then through various things, I wasn't even hired to be student ministry here at Relevant. I think I've had every job here except for yours and worship pastor. And so I've done everything just about. And just through other things, and our former youth pastor who had the opportunity to go back to his home church, led to me stepping into this role that I had actually interviewed for 4 years prior. And
it's a 4-year interview process.
Yeah, it really was. It was literally the longest interview process possible. But it was just God saying, not yet.
Well, that's good. This is the podcast that, a lot of times I do a lot of talking on. And you kind of interject, but this is a great story to stick with. Because I think I know your story of those 4 years. I know some of the growth that happened in your life, some of the changes that happened in your life. And I think there was, and now I see your life now, and I see the joy that you have. I see now you're married with a baby, and Krista's involvement here, and just, you're just better equipped. And I think about Joseph's life along the way too. God gives him a dream at 17. He's almost 37-ish when that dream becomes a reality. Yours was a 4-year interview process. His was a 20-year interview process. But the same thing is true. You were faithful in that season. You used that platform. You didn't abuse that platform. And then you were in guest services and various things. And I just think, I think if I could say anything to our listeners, this is a great story to file away and remember when you're like, wait, God, what are you doing? I don't understand. I thought, be patient with the process and the people along the way and what happens along the way and and be faithful in the little things. Don't despise small beginnings. And then now, it's crazy because you speak on the main stage, 3 or 4 times a year, which is a pretty big stage to fill. And I don't say that very
I have a friend who's here on staff, and he gave me the tour of the church for the first time. I remember he took me onto the main stage, which is now the kids stage, and I just made a joke and said, I want to speak on the stage one day. As a joke, he's like, shut up. And and never really thinking that may have ever happened, because at the time I think I was even turned down for the youth pastor position. And so it was a joke, and it's really cool to kind of see how you're faithful in the small things. I can look back, and I know that this isn't true for everyone's life. Sometimes you're given a substantial amount at certain times, but for me, I can look back and there's bite sizes. Just
it's funny you said you want to speak on that stage, which is like less than half the size of our new auditorium.
Oh, I know.
And now you've spoken on the new auditorium 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen times, probably 10 times now. But this past year, what were the topics you told me? You're like, I feel very ready for this. You've given me, what were the topics you spoke on?
Sex. You gave me money and the Holy Spirit. So I'm just, anything you throw at me, let's go.
There we go. So that's been fun to see that growth process. And so the dream that you had of a stage of 400 is now, 4 services on 400 is now a stage of, potential 1,000 people in the room in a given service. So here's the second one. So we abuse it, don't abuse it. And number 2 is this: to make the most of your platform, be content with your calling. Key is your calling. Because here's your calling, and my calling may not be to be the second most powerful man in the world, which Joseph ended up becoming in Pharaoh's palace. But I want you to hear something. If you had someone else's platform, you would be miserable, because God didn't call you to that. And so it's easy for me to look at this person or that person and compare and this and that and go, well, if I could just do that. And if I just really realize I could have someone else's platform and be out of God's plan and God's will for my life and be utterly miserable. And I think that is so important, is like, be content in your calling. And so here's a couple things. Bob Goff, he just has a way of saying things to make things fun and enjoyable and life-giving. He says, we won't be distracted by comparison if we're captivated with purpose. Now, here's the crazy part.
That's so good.
what we're learning is not our purpose, God's purpose. If we're captivated while doing what God has for us today, we won't be distracted by what somebody else posts on social media today, what somebody else does today. We'll be captivated by God's plan and purpose. And here's the thing I would say about this. I've said this before. I believe it. Comparison is an act of violence against your soul and against your calling. Wow. So if I compare, like, let's say I compare someone else's marriage to my marriage, that's an act of violence against my marriage. If I compare someone else's kids to my kids, that's an act of violence against my kids on a spiritual level.
And even if we have people in ministry listening to this, I lived this in a season where I would see what all the other youth groups were doing. And God's moving in my youth group. Good things are happening, but we're not doing what this church is doing. And so now I'm taking away from what God's doing here because my eyes are over there.
It's crazy you say that because, listen, I have friends that do this. We've done this. Let's just be real honest. Let's just kind of, this is the Good Life podcast. Honest. Let's just throw it out on the table. You know, there was a season where churches would post all their numbers online and what they did and this and that and the other. And then COVID hit and it was like, oh, my numbers aren't as good anymore. So we're going to quit. Now we're just going to take all of our online numbers and say we're going to report that. But nobody knows who showed up and who watched the 3-second clip online. We just got to the point where we're like, I mean, every number has a name. Every name has a story, and every story matters to God. We've said that. It's not anything original. It's not our own saying. But like putting a number on a thing saying we had 3,572 people, and inflating numbers or double count. That stuff don't matter. My thing is how many lives are changing. Are people taking their next steps? Are we focusing? And like, what are the measurables that are leading to life-changing people coming fully devoted followers of Jesus? Because when that happens, the church explodes. And we won't be reporting numbers on a piece of paper. We'll be going, where can we put all these people?
Right. And I shared this, I think, with you the other day. My phrase for this year is significance over success. Success, we had 3,000 people here. Right? Significance, we had 120 people take next steps.
It's funny because that's great. I'm a part of a strategic launch network at Lake Point Church in Dallas with a bunch of pastors who believe in church planting, who believe in various things. And I'll never forget something that was said at a teaching that we were together with about 100 pastors recently, of most of either church planters or very large churches. And one of the gentlemen that was teaching made the comment. He said, we need to be more focused on on-ramps than cul-de-sacs. Wow. He said, people come into cul-de-sacs and they gather and they hang out and they throw the football and they just stay there. They just stay there. But where are we on-ramping people to? What exit, where are we taking them? And so, I love the cul-de-sac. It's where you play football in the neighborhood. It's where it's where all the action.
Grew up in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, it's that I love the cul-de-sac. I love the big gatherings. But the question is, what are people doing when they come to those gatherings? And so the whole point here is like being content with your calling. If we're not careful, we'll start comparing our wins to other people's wins, our wins to other people's losses. Our numbers or our this or our that or our business or our marriage or our kids or our ministry, whatever you're doing in life. And so I'm using this from a ministry perspective, and there will be ministry leaders and pastors listening, but on a daily perspective, be careful what you compare yourself to.
Yes.
And I remember our former worship pastor told me this. He said that we were talking about sound and media and everything during COVID, and our audio and the new, like we move into a new building as me and a camera crew, and we're trying to figure this whole thing out. And he said, he read this quote and it's changed my perspective. Comparison. He said, success is not measured by comparison. Success is measured by progress. So the question is, am I a better parent today than I was yesterday? Yep. Am I a better spouse today than I was yesterday? Am I a better pastor today? Am I a better business leader? Look at yourself month over month, year over year. Quit looking at other people, because if you do that, it'll rob you of contentment in your calling and in your purpose.
Yes.
So number 3, and we'll wrap this whole conversation up about purpose. Number 3, provide for the people in front of you. If we're not careful, we'll think about our next step. I know at Relevant, we're in 2 services. We're talking about 3 services once the new auditorium is completely full. I remember the day when we were in 4 services, Saturday night, a Thursday night, 5 services, 6 services, trying to figure out what to do to get people. We're turning people away. We didn't know what to do to get people in the building. And I remember like being tempted to just look at the future and miss out on the now. I think one of the marks of my calling and my intentionality in ministry has always been what's happening today. What's happening with the people in front of me that I can serve. So Joseph does this. He's number 2 and then second most powerful man in the world. His brothers come. He serves them. He provides for because there's a famine in the land. Egypt has stored up all this food. Israelites are coming trying to say, we need food from this man, Joseph, who's basically provided all this food.
Right.
Now they come and he provides for them. He could have held it over their head what they did. No, but he provided for them. So here's, again, I shared these stories, I think, in the kickoff week of the sermon series on life's toughest questions. Two things I can think of in recent years that I've done as an example, not to float my boat or anything, but I want to give you an example of what this looks like. About 4 years ago, there was a major tragedy in our community. A young lady lost her life, and we hosted the memorial service here. And we only had an auditorium that would seat 400 at the time, and we had people standing room outside watching. I mean, we had every room in the entire building, thousands of people here for that. I remember the evening before, just for the visitation, people were lined up down to the road, and major tragedy, still heartbreaking what happened. And I just saw the people in front of me. And we're a church of close to a couple thousand at the time. And I remember staying late one Saturday to clean up. I didn't have any intentions, but I'm not beyond that as a lead pastor. That doesn't, but this is our community hurting. This is people going through some difficult, and there's an organization in our community who does a lot for the community. And the president of that organization was here in our building, and she made the comment to one of our staff afterwards. She said, "I've never seen a lead pastor of a church this size sweeping floors." I wasn't trying to I was just doing what God, I was being faithful to serve and provide for the people in front of me. And that whole organization, for the most part, attends our church today because they saw that. And now we're partnering with them, serving families and people in underprivileged areas, all because I think we as a church, and I think as a leader, that was now here's the question. I don't know how many times I've missed it on that either. So let's be honest. Recently, on a Sunday morning, we were out in the lobby, and I had a white shirt on, a white, just a sweatshirt, basic sweatshirt. I spoke on the first service, speaking on the second service, and it was in between service, and I walk out, and our cafe is lit up. Now, mind you, and I don't say this arrogantly because I'm anti this, but yes, I have a safety team. They follow me. They know where I'm at. I don't even know where they're at. I walked by a safety team member one day, and they're telling me, "Hey, he's approaching this part." I don't even know what's going on. There are churches our size and pastors of churches, they have people just following them like, an entourage. That's not me. I don't want that. I don't care for that. I don't need that. Just don't allow me to get to the platform on time, preach the message, make sure, anyway, I walk over to the cafe and they're slammed. And I walked back there and said, they need help. And so I just started making, I was like, where are the gloves? So I just started making shots for the coffee because I know how to do that. I don't know how to make. And I was like, here, y'all move out of the way. I'll just make the shots and y'all do y'all's thing. And so for about 20 minutes, I made probably 50 shots in the cafe espresso machine, whatever that's called. I didn't do that for any other reason but to serve those people who serve our church so faithfully. Yeah. Because they are a vital part of the life-changing environment that happens here on Sunday morning. I didn't even care if anybody noticed. That was not it was just to provide for the people in front of. Yep. Yeah. I cannot tell you how many people have stopped me and said, I've never seen a lead pastor. And look, you had a white shirt on. You could have got coffee on your shirt. You'd had to preach in a white. Yeah. It doesn't matter. And so I say all that to say, like, there are hundreds of times that I miss this. But when you do it right, it impacts people.
It sure does.
And so Joseph basically honors his brothers, provides for them in spite of what happened to him because of them. And so I think too many times we're looking for bigger and better opportunities, and God says, look right in front of you.
Yep. Wow, that's good.
Yep. So I'll say this, and then we'll be done. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sending us a message, letting us know what part of this purpose series has made the most impact in your life, because this is something that our church has been begging for. Here's what I would say. The picture of your purpose, what your purpose looks like in the future, is really part of a bigger picture of God's purpose. So let's be careful not to get caught up on what's my purpose. It's what's God's purpose, and how can I be a part of that today? So if I can leave you with anything else. So, hey, man, it's been fun. Thanks for sharing your story. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Good Life podcast. God bless you.